Hello. So this video is all about epithelium and when we're looking at it for histology. So the first one we want to start with is simple squamous epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium is located in a few different places. You can find it in the alveolus of the lung, inside the lining of blood vessels, and we'll look at it in a sec, the glomerular capsule of the kidney. Now, its purpose or its function is to reduce friction and to absorb and secrete. So when we actually look at simple squamous epithelium, one of the things I always think are they look like the cutest little fried eggs. Little blue or purple fried eggs where the egg yolk is the nucleus. So you can see the little purple circle here. And then the egg white would be that cytoplasm. So if we were to focus on this cell right here, this would be the nucleus and everything surrounding it would be the cytoplasm. Now, if we go ahead and zoom in, you can see this much better. Again, we have the nucleus here, cytoplasm surrounding, and then the cell membrane just on the edge of the cell. Now, every time you see a nucleus, that indicates a new cell. So if you see little purple fried eggs, then you are looking at simple squamous. Simple because it is one layer, and squamous because they are irregular shaped and they're flat. Again, so if we look here at the cortex of the kidney, then we can see these little, it almost looks like little hole punches or little thumbprints, right? Tiny little thumbprints. And what this is the glomerulus. And when we zoom in on that, we can actually see that inside we have that simple squamous. So that one layered cells, they look like little fried eggs on the inside. So I would be having the pointer right here if I were to test my students on the exam. Now, the next one I want to talk about is going to be the stratified squamous epithelium. Now, for the stratified squamous epithelium, there are two types. There is the keratinized and the non-keratinized. Keratinized meaning that you have it on the epidermis of the skin, so the part that you touch. It is very much a hard, waterproof layer. So what we can see is stratified. You have these multiple layers of cells. And squamous because they still look flat and irregular shaped. Again, every little dark purple circle is going to indicate a nucleus. And a lot of times I look at the top because when you see how it almost looks like it's thin or it's shredding away, that right there is going to tell you that it is keratinized. So it is the dry version. Now, the function for both keratinized and non-keratinized is physical protection against abrasion and also protecting against pathogens. So from this darker purple layer here, up all of this is going to be stratified squamous epithelium. This lighter color down here, that is actually a connective tissue, which I'll talk about if you click on that connective tissue video. Now, for the next one, here is another image of, again, that stratified squamous keratinized, and you can really see these dead sheets of cells. So these are these dead sheets, dead layers of cells, where, again, if you're scratching your hand or rubbing it, they'll come off and it creates the dust. So it looking very dry and very darkly stained, that's going to indicate that it is keratinized. The multiple layers, that's going to tell you that it's stratified. Now, if we look at this one, this is actually the stratified squamous non-keratinized, meaning that it is a bit more lubricated. So we would find this in the vagina, or we could also find this on the lining of the esophagus. Now, if you think about the vagina, it is lubricated, right? So the tissue is going to be much softer, more supple. And when you actually look at these cells, the little nucleus, what I tell my students is it looks like it's floating inside of a cell filled with water. So again, if we go back right here, This looks dry. It looks dark purple. You can't see anything translucent. It's hard to see the lining of each cell, so the cell membrane of each cell. But we go here, look, we don't have those strips of dead skin cells at the top. It almost looks like you rehydrated that stratified squamous from the previous slide, right? So this is more spongy, more filled with quote unquote water. So when it looks like this, then we're talking about non-keratinized. And again, it's going to start at this layer and go up. So all of this is going to be stratified squamous, non-keratinized. Whereas down here, again, will be a connective tissue. So moving into the next one that we have right here, this is our transitional epithelium. And for the transitional epithelium, we can find it in the urinary bladder. We can also find it in the ureter. Now, its purpose or its function is to allow expansion and recoil after stretching. So it needs to be able to get very small because the bladder gets very big and full. So all that urine will then push on the cells, making them smaller. But then when you empty your urinary bladder, those cells are able to breathe in a sense because there's no pressure pushing on them anymore. So they get much smaller. So this would indicate more of an empty bladder. But the image I like is right here. So this transitional epithelium, it looks very fluffy. This is the transitional epithelium from here to here. All of this, again, connective tissue. But you can see just the shape of the cell. It's a lot more circular. The nuclei are bigger. So you have these big, dark circles. So the nucleus is much bigger. And for me, it just looks very light, very airy, okay? So this would be more of an emptied bladder, whereas the previous one would be more of a full bladder, because you can see that they're squished together right here. And here they actually are allowed to breathe and take up the shape they actually have. And here's another beautiful image of transitional epithelium. And again, you can just see how much bigger, you can see the shape of the cell. Now, sometimes this is mistaken for the stratified squamous, non-keratinized. And one of the things I want to tell you is here, we still have where we can see the shape of the cell and it's large, yes, but it is not translucent. It does not look clear, right? This is filled with color. So there's color throughout the cells. Whereas before, let me flip. Again, it was clear. So there's no purple cytoplasm, if you will. But here you can see that it is completely filled, okay? So again, this more fluffy texture is going to be that transitional epithelium. Now, when we come to this one right here, this one is actually simple cuboidal. And simple because it is one layer, cuboidal because they are cube-shaped. Now, one of the things I tell my students is simple cuboidal tends to be seen in little rings. They look like little Cheerios, if you will, okay? And these little rings indicate that they are tubules or ducts. So you can actually find simple cuboidal in the kidney, so in the tubules of the kidney, as well as ducts of glands that you find, say, in the digestive tract. Now, the function is limited protection, secretion, and absorption. Now, some things I wanted to point out, and I'll show it in this next image here. Again, look at these cute little, almost like Cheerios, right? So each one of these is a cell, and they go all the way around in a circle because, again, it's like a tube. So if you had a straw and you look at the top of the straw, this is what you would see. So this is why it appears as a circle. This space right here, so I'll point to it in different ducts, that is called the lumen. And the lumen is actually where the substance will travel, whether it is blood, whether it is urine or filtration, any type of glandular secretion travels in the inside, just like the straw, right? The milkshake is going to be inside the straw, not the plastic itself. So we call this space the lumen. Now, the part of the cells that are touching the lumen, that is the apical portion, so the top portion of the cell. It's very interesting because over here, I'll use this one for example. If you look at this cell right here, this part is the apical portion, but up here, this is the apical portion. So it's like this cell is upside down, if you will, and it's just because it is going in a circle. So the way I remember it is, what is touching the lumen? The part of the cell touching the lumen is the apical portion, and the part that isn't is the basal portion. So I think to myself, basement, membrane, basal, bottom is the bottom portion of the cell. So all of this would be the basal portion, and all of this the apical. And again, the center is the lumen when we're talking about simple cuboidal. Now, another one that we have is simple columnar, and you can find it in the lining of the GI tract. Now, its function is protection as well as absorption and secretion. One thing that you actually can see for simple columnar is it has the little tiny microvilli, okay? So it almost looks like a little peach fuzz on top of the cell. So you can see this little peach fuzz here, as well as here. And we know that this is simple columnar, simple, one layer, because you can, again, focus on the nuclei. So here's a nuclei, here's another one, and another, and another. And if we follow that, that can make one straight line, okay? That tells you that it's one layer. Ignore all of this. This is just, again, a different type of connective tissue. We're looking at this outside layer here. And also look at how long these cells are. They are column shaped, which is why we say columnar. So the peach fuzz, the column shape, and the fact that it is one layer will tell you that it is simple columnar. We can also look right here for another image of simple columnar. So again, if we follow it, we see that there's just one layer there. You see this very light peach fuzz around the edge. And then if we zoom in, we can see that microvilli even better now. And again, this very large nucleus with a lot of cytoplasm on top and a lot of cytoplasm on the bottom because it is a column shape. It is much longer than that cuboidal was. Now let's move into the next one. You might be looking at this and go, oh, this must be stratified. Nuh-uh. Yes, it does look like it has multiple layers. If you follow the nuclei, there's lots of layers of nuclei. However, the giveaway would be these little hairs right here. This is called cilia. When you see very long, obvious cilia, and this is different from the peach fuzz microvilli we just saw, long, obvious cilia, that tells you that we're looking at one of my favorites, pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium, okay? PSCC. It's pseudo-stratified, meaning that it looks like it's stratified, but it's not. Columnar, because the shape of the cell is column, it's very long. And it is ciliated, the little hairs on the edge, okay? So from here up, this is going to be pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Now you can find this in the lining of the respiratory system, so in the nasal cavity, the trachea, and the bronchi, primarily to get rid of all that nasty stuff that's in the air, whether it's dust, smoke, and you kind of want to, turn it into a booger, turn it into, as my husband calls it, lung butter, so you can cough it up. You can also find it in portions of the male reproductive tract because the cilia will actually push the sperm to help with ejaculation. Now, its function is going to be protection as well as secretion. So if we zoom in here, it's a little fuzzy, so I apologize. I just want you to see these cilia and just how you can see almost like each individual hair. And you couldn't see that with simple columnar. So that's going to be a huge difference when you're trying to tell the difference between the two. But also right here, how you have a numerous amount of nuclei. That tells you that we're looking at that pseudo-stratified. And then here is another image from the trachea where you can see that pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And look at how long this cilia is right here, okay? So cilia is very long, and again, its purpose is to catch things, and it gets shorter actually when it's damaged from things like smoking, living in an area that has way too much pollution. But you see some of the same things with the multiple nuclei. It's very long in structure. So all of this is going to, again, be that pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And that's it. That's the epithelial tissue that I require my students to know for human anatomy. If you have any questions or if you would like to see any other videos, go ahead and leave a comment below.